It is inconvenient. That was the only word Silas said. He stared at the ultrasound picture I had just excitedly placed on his polished glass desk. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He just looked at the grainy black and white image of my unborn child like it was a stain on his expensive furniture. My heart, which had been racing with joy just seconds ago, suddenly slammed against my ribs in panic. I had waited 3 years for this moment. After rounds of IVF, thousands of dollars, and endless tears, I was finally pregnant. I thought Silas, the owner's son who had taken over the company just last week, would appreciate my honesty. I thought my 5 years of perfect service as the vice president of public relations mattered. I was wrong. Silas leaned back in his leather chair, crossing his arms over his chest. His eyes were cold, devoid of any human empathy. "We are pivoting to a 24/7 wartime strategy, Maya," he said, his voice smooth and terrifyingly calm. "I need killers in this office. I need executives who live and breathe this stock price. I cannot have a VP who is distracted by biology." The air left the room. I tried to speak, but my throat closed up. He didn't wait for me to defend myself. He reached for his phone and pressed a button. "Security?" "Yes." "Come to my office." "Hand over your badge, Maya." "You are done effective immediately." The walk from his office to the elevator felt like a funeral march. 2 security guards, men I had greeted every single morning for 5 years, flanked me like I was a criminal who had been caught stealing office supplies. They refused to make eye contact with me. I could feel the eyes of my team burning into my back as I was paraded through the open-plan office. My face burned with humiliation. I clutched the cardboard box containing my personal belongings against my chest, my knuckles turning white. Inside the box was that ultrasound picture Silas had dismissed so cruelly. The elevator doors pinged open, and the guards stepped in with me. The silence was suffocating. I felt a wave of nausea, not from the pregnancy, but from the sheer shock of what had just happened. My hands were trembling so violently that I almost dropped the box when the doors opened to the lobby. "We need your badge, Maya," one of the guards muttered, finally looking at me with pity in his eyes. I unclipped it from my blazer with shaking fingers and dropped it into his hand. It felt like I was handing over my identity. I walked out the revolving doors and onto the busy city street, feeling completely exposed. 10 minutes ago, I was a powerful executive. Now, I was standing on the curb, unemployed, pregnant, and erased. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to remember how to breathe. Silas had made a catastrophic mistake, but he was too arrogant to realize it yet. I wasn't just an employee who wrote press releases. I was the architect of their reputation. I was the fixer. When the company suffered that massive data leak in 2022, I was the one who stayed up for 72 hours straight, crafting the messaging that saved the stock price. When the former CFO tweeted a slur that almost caused a boycott, I was the one who buried the story and managed the apology tour. Silas, with his shiny MBA and his father's money, had no idea how the real world worked. He thought the company's reputation was naturally bulletproof. He didn't understand that the only reason the public trusted his brand was because I controlled the narrative. I knew where the bodies were buried because I was the one who dug the graves. I knew the passwords to the crisis accounts. I knew the personal phone numbers of the top tech journalists. I held the keys to the kingdom, and he had just thrown me out because he thought a pregnant woman couldn't handle the pressure. He saw liability. He had no idea he had just fired his only shield against the chaos of the market. My phone buzzed in my lap before I even started the engine. It was an email from Human Resources. The subject line read, "Exit agreement urgent." I opened it, squinting through the tears that were finally starting to fall. It was a severance package. They were offering me 3 months of pay, which sounded generous on the surface, but I knew better. I scrolled down to the fine print, my eyes scanning the legal jargon I had written hundreds of times for others. There it was. The money was conditional. To get the check, I had to sign a lifetime non-disclosure agreement. The contract forbade me from ever mentioning internal culture, leadership decisions, or the circumstances of my departure. Basically, they were buying my silence. But the worst part was the health insurance. The email stated clearly that my company-sponsored health coverage would be terminated at midnight tonight unless I signed the agreement by 5 p.m. They were holding my baby's health hostage. They knew about the IVF. They knew I had a high-risk pregnancy that required expensive specialist visits every 2 weeks. Without insurance, those appointments would cost thousands of dollars out of pocket. Silas wasn't just firing me, he was putting a gun to my head and forcing me to choose between my dignity and my medical care. I drove home in a daze. When I walked through the front door, my husband, Mark, was working at the kitchen table. He looked up, smiling, expecting to hear about how the boss reacted to our happy news. When he saw my tear-streaked face and the box of office supplies in my arms, his smile vanished. I collapsed into a chair and told him everything. I told him about the inconvenient comment. I told him about the security guards. I told him about the insurance threat. Mark read the contract, his jaw tightening with every line. "We need the insurance, Maya," he whispered, looking terrified. "The baby, the specialist costs," he was right. We had drained our savings for the fertility treatments. We were vulnerable. But then I looked at the digital signature line on the tablet screen. If I signed this, Silas won. If I signed this, I was agreeing that I was wrong to be pregnant. I felt a cold, hard rage settle in my chest, replacing the panic. "No," I said, my voice steady for the first time all day. "I am not signing it. I won't let him bully us." Mark looked at me, saw the fire in my eyes, and nodded. I deleted the email. I was betting on myself. Silas had started a war, but he had forgotten that I was the one who wrote the strategy guides. 2 weeks passed. The silence from my end was deafening. I didn't blast them on social media. I didn't write a tearful LinkedIn post about resilience. I went completely dark. The industry started to whisper. People wondered where the Queen of Spin had gone. I received dozens of texts from former colleagues and journalists, asking if I was okay. I didn't answer a single one. I stayed home, rested, and took my prenatal vitamins. I let the absence of my work speak louder than any statement I could write. Meanwhile, without me there to monitor the channels, the cracks began to show immediately. I watched from my laptop as the first negative Glassdoor review appeared. It was from a junior developer, complaining about the toxic new leadership and unrealistic deadlines. Usually, I would have flagged this immediately, responded with a carefully crafted corporate statement, and buried it under positive employee testimonials. But I wasn't there. The review stayed up. Then another appeared. Then a third. The rating dropped from a 4.5 to a 3.8 in 10 days. The internal culture I was forbidden to speak about was leaking out all on its own, and Silas was too busy looking at spreadsheets to notice the water rising around his ankles. The first real explosion happened on a Tuesday. A customer posted a photo on Twitter showing a minor defect in one of the company's flagship smart devices. It wasn't a huge deal, a simple manufacturing error that happens to everyone. In the past, I would have called the customer, offered a refund and a free upgrade, and turned them into a brand loyalist within an hour. I would have killed the story with kindness before it got more than 10 likes. But Silas saw the tweet. Arrogant, inexperienced, and lacking any filter, he decided to handle it himself. He replied directly from his personal verified account, quoting the customer's complaint. "This looks like user error to me," he wrote. "Maybe buy better Wi-Fi instead of blaming the hardware." I stared at my screen, my mouth hanging open. He had just insulted a paying customer on a public platform. The tweet started to pick up traction instantly. People were retweeting it, tagging tech blogs, and mocking his arrogance. He had violated the #1 rule of PR, never punch down. I took a sip of my herbal tea and watched the numbers climb. He had lit a match in a room full of gasoline, and he didn't even know it. The backlash was instant and severe. Within 4 hours, user error was trending in the tech category. TechCrunch picked up the story, running a headline about the CEO's meltdown. I sat on my couch, watching Silas try to delete the tweet, but the screenshots were already everywhere. He was flailing. While I watched his reputation burn, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it anyway. It was the head of talent for Nexus. Nexus was a mid-sized competitor to Silas's company. They were smaller, scrappier, and known for being ethical, though they lacked the market share my old company had. Maya, the recruiter said, getting straight to the point. We heard you left. We also saw the tweet today. We need someone who knows how to build trust, not destroy it. Can you come in for a meeting tomorrow? I hesitated. I was visibly pregnant now. I couldn't hide it. You should know, I said, I am expecting. I will need time off soon. The recruiter didn't pause. We know your track record, Maya. We want your brain. The rest we can figure out. I walked into the Nexus headquarters the next morning. I wore my best blazer, but there was no hiding the bump. I was 6 months pregnant and clearly showing. I was nervous. In my industry, pregnancy was often treated like a terminal illness, a career-ending condition. I walked into the interview room prepared for a fight. The CEO, a man named Mr. Vance, stood up and shook my hand warmly. He didn't look at my stomach, he looked me in the eye. I'll be honest, I said, putting my cards on the table immediately. I will need maternity leave in 3 months. My priority will be my child. If that is a problem for your timeline, we shouldn't waste each other's time. Mr. Vance smiled. Maya, I didn't bring you here to fill a seat for 90 days. I brought you here to help us build a legacy for the next 10 years. We hire brains, not hours. If you need leave, you take leave. We will support you. I felt tears prick my eyes. It was the exact opposite of Silas's inconvenient comment. They offered me a position as the VP of Communications with a higher base salary than I had left behind. I accepted on the spot. My first day at Nexus was jarring. I kept waiting for the screaming. At my old job, the culture Silas encouraged was one of fear. People yelled, threw files, and panicked over every fluctuating number. At Nexus, it was quiet. People collaborated in the break rooms. No one was looking over their shoulder. I felt my cortisol levels lower for the first time in years. I realized how traumatized I had been by the toxic environment Silas had created. Meanwhile, the industry news was filled with reports about Silas's company. Stock analysts had downgraded their rating from buy to hold, citing volatile leadership communication. The user error tweet hadn't just been a bad moment, it had spooked the investors. They worried that if the CEO could be triggered by a single tweet, he couldn't handle the pressure of a looming recession. Silas was trying to pivot, announcing aggressive new sales targets to distract from the bad press, but the market wasn't buying it. He needed a spin doctor to fix the narrative, but he had fired the only one who could do it. I focused on my new team, launching a campaign about Nexus's customer-first approach. It was easy work because it was true. 2 weeks into my new job, my personal phone started blowing up with texts. It was my old team, the junior PR managers, the copywriters, the social media leads. They were miserable. It's hell here, my former assistant, Sarah, texted me. He fired the compliance officer today because he said compliance slows down innovation. Everyone is terrified. Another text came through from the head of product design. He's screaming at us to cut costs on the new release. He wants to switch to cheaper battery suppliers to save margin. It's dangerous, Maya. I read the messages with a heavy heart. I wanted to help them, but I couldn't save them from the inside anymore. However, I could save them another way. I didn't tell them to quit. I didn't badmouth Silas. I simply replied with a single link, the Nexus careers page. We had openings. I knew these people were talented. I knew they were loyal. And I knew they were desperate. I forwarded their resumes to Mr. Vance with a note, hire them. You won't regret it. The exodus began slowly, then all at once. It started with Sarah, my assistant, who knew every administrative secret of the old company. Then the lead graphic designer left. Then 2 senior engineers. One by one, the talent migrated from Silas's glass tower to our open plan office. Silas wasn't just losing employees, he was losing the institutional memory of how his company actually functioned. He tried to stop it, of course. He sent out threatening emails about non-compete clauses, but the legal team at Nexus looked them over and laughed. The contracts were outdated and unenforceable, another detail Silas would have known if he hadn't fired his lead counsel the week prior to save money. At Nexus, we welcomed the refugees. The mood in our office was electric. We had the best talent in the industry, and they were motivated by spite. They wanted to prove Silas wrong. We were building a dream team purely out of the people Silas had discarded as fat to be trimmed. The brain drain at his company was catastrophic. He was left with yes men and interns who didn't know how to run the servers. With no PR filter to manage his image and no compliance officer to check his decisions, Silas began cutting corners aggressively to boost his quarterly profits. He was desperate to get the stock price back up. I started seeing anonymous tips appearing on industry forums like Reddit and Blind. They were technical, specific complaints about safety bypasses. I recognized the internal project codes used in the posts. These weren't just rumors, they were leaks from the engineers who were still stuck there. They were warning the public that the new batch of devices had batteries from a supplier that hadn't been properly vetted. Silas was ignoring the safety data to hit his shipping deadline. It was a ticking time bomb. At Nexus, we held our breath. We knew what was coming. We ensured our own products were tested triple time. We prepared our messaging. We didn't have to attack Silas, we just had to be the safe harbor when his ship sank. The leaks grew louder. The tech community was buzzing with rumors that the new device was a fire hazard. An investigative reporter I had known for years, a sharp woman named Diane, invited me to lunch. We met at a quiet cafe away from the tech district. She looked tired. Maya, she said, leaning in over her coffee. Off the record. I'm hearing terrifying things about the battery stability in Silas's new launch. You used to run that ship. Is he really bypassing the safety protocols? I looked at her. I remembered the NDA I hadn't signed. I remembered the severance I hadn't taken. I remembered the ultrasound he called inconvenient. I took a sip of my water and looked her dead in the eye. Diane, I said softly, Silas fired the compliance officer 3 weeks ago. He replaced the battery supplier to save 12 cents per unit. You should look at the stress test reports from last month. If they even exist. I didn't give her documents. I didn't break the law. I just pointed her in the direction of the truth. Her eyes widened. She nodded, paid the bill, and left. My silence on the details was the loudest confirmation she needed. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 month before my due date. The headline was massive, splashed across the front page of the most respected tech news site in the country, Tech Giant Gambles with User Safety, Inside the Battery Scandal. It wasn't just a PR crisis, it was a PR nuclear bomb. Diane had done her homework. She had sources, she had leaked emails, and she had the test results showing the batteries were unstable at high temperatures. The internet exploded. Customers who had pre-ordered the device were demanding refunds. The stock price, which had been shaky, went into freefall. It dropped 15% in the first hour of trading. Regulators announced an immediate investigation. The Consumer Protection Agency issued a warning. Silas's face was on every news channel, looking sweaty and defensive as he tried to claim the reports were fake news. But without a PR strategist to guide him, he looked guilty. He looked like a man who had been caught putting profit over people. My phone rang at 2 p.m. I looked at the screen. It was a blocked number. I knew who it was. My heart rate kicked up a notch, but I took a deep breath, rubbed my belly, and answered. Hello? Maya. It was Silas. His voice was high and tight, stripped of all the arrogance he had shown me in his office months ago. He sounded like a frightened child. Maya, look, I know we had our differences. I know things ended, abruptly. But you know this system's architecture better than anyone. You know these batteries are safe enough. I need a quote. I need you to come out and say this is standard industry practice. I can pay you. Consulting fee. Double your old salary. He was begging. He wanted me to use my reputation, the one I had built over a decade, to shield him from his own greed. He wanted me to lie for him. He truly believed that money could fix the bridge he had burned with a flamethrower. I let the silence hang on the line for 10 seconds. I wanted him to feel the weight of it. I wanted him to sweat. Silas, I said, my voice calm and icy. I can't help you. Why not? He snapped, a flash of his old anger breaking through the panic. I'm offering you a fortune. You're unemployed, for God's sake, you need the money for the kid. I'm not unemployed, I corrected him gently. I'm the VP of Communications at Nexus. And as for helping you, I'm just a mother, Silas. You told me yourself that biology is a distraction. I wouldn't want to distract you from your wartime strategy. I could hear him sputtering on the other end, trying to find words, but I didn't give him the chance. Good luck with the recall, I said, and hung up. My hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. It was the most satisfying phone call of my life. Silas didn't take the rejection well. Cornered and desperate, he tried to sue the newspaper for defamation. It backfired spectacularly. The lawsuit opened up the discovery process, meaning the court could demand to see his internal emails. His lawyers likely told him to drop it, but he was too proud. Then, he tried to blame the previous administration. He went on a business news channel and insinuated that the bad decisions were made by the former team before he took over. He was trying to pin his crimes on me. That was his fatal error. I didn't issue a press release. I simply posted a single photo on my LinkedIn. It was a picture of my Employee of the Year plaque from 2023, dated just weeks before he took over. The caption read, "Proud of the safety record we maintained for 5 years. Sad to see the new direction. Integrity matters." The post went viral. Former employees commented, defending me. The internet rallied. He tried to smear me, but he only highlighted his own incompetence. The investors fled. They saw a CEO who was fighting with pregnant women and suing journalists instead of fixing his product. The stock price plummeted 40% in a single week. It was a bloodbath. The company's valuation dropped below its assets. At Nexus, Mr. Vance called an emergency board meeting. We gathered in the conference room. The mood was serious but energized. We weren't in trouble, we were looking at the opportunity of a lifetime. Silas's company had massive infrastructure, warehouses, and patents that were valuable, but the brand was toxic. They were bleeding cash. They can't survive this, Mr. Vance said, looking at the projections. They will be bankrupt in 30 days. I raised my hand. Unless someone buys them out, I said. We don't need their brand. We need their logistics. If we buy them now, we get everything for pennies on the dollar. The board looked at me. It was the killer executive move Silas had wanted, delivered by the woman he fired. The unexpected twist came the next morning. We found out through financial channels that Silas wasn't just incompetent, he was personally broke. To buy the CEO title and force his way into control, he had leveraged his personal shares. He had taken up massive loans against the stock price. With the stock crashing 40%, the banks issued a margin call. They were demanding Silas pay back the loans immediately. He didn't have the cash. He was facing personal bankruptcy. He had gambled his entire inheritance on his ability to run the company, and he had lost. He had no choice. He had to sell the company immediately to cover his debts, or he would lose everything, including his own home. He was a distressed seller. He had no leverage. He was at the mercy of the market, and the market was us. Nexus prepared the buyout offer. It was aggressive. We offered to buy the company for a fraction of what it was worth 6 months ago. We would absorb their debts, take their technology, and acquire their client list. But there were conditions. Strict ones. The primary condition was a total leadership purge. Silas and his entire executive team had to be terminated immediately upon signing. No golden parachutes. No consulting gigs. They had to go. We sent the offer over on a Friday afternoon. We gave them 24 hours to accept. It was a hostile takeover disguised as a lifeline. Silas tried to shop the deal around to other buyers, but no one wanted to touch the toxic mess he had created. He was trapped. He had to sign our deal, or the bank would seize his assets on Monday morning. The acquisition meeting was set for Sunday. I walked into the building I had been thrown out of 6 months ago. The security guard at the front desk, the same one who had looked so sad when I left, saw me coming. His eyes went wide. He stood up and saluted me with a huge grin. "Welcome back, ma'am," he said. I walked to the elevator. I was heavily pregnant now, waddling slightly, one hand on my back. I wore a comfortable maternity dress, not a power suit. I didn't need a suit to project power anymore. I had the checkbook. I rode the elevator up to the top floor, the silence replaced by a quiet confidence. I walked into the boardroom. The lawyers were there. Mr. Vance was there. And at the end of the table sat Silas. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He was unshaven, his tie was loose, and he was staring at the table. He looked 5 years older. Silas didn't look up when I entered. He kept his eyes fixed on the mahogany table, likely unable to face the reality of who was standing across from him. The Nexus lawyers slid the paperwork across the table. The sound of the paper sliding was the only noise in the room. "Sign here and here," the lawyer said. Silas picked up the pen. His hand was shaking violently. He signed his name. With those strokes of the pen, he signed away his father's legacy. He signed away the company he had bullied his way into. He signed away his future. He didn't just lose the business, he lost his status, his reputation, and his fortune. The moment he lifted the pen, he was no longer the CEO. He was just a man with a lot of debt and a bad resume. Mr. Vance countersigned. It was done. Nexus owned everything. As the meeting adjourned, the lawyers began to pack up. Silas finally looked up. His eyes met mine. There was no anger left in them, just a hollow, confused defeat. "You planned this," he whispered, his voice raspy. "You engineered the leaks. You destroyed me." I paused at the door, my hand resting protectively on my stomach. I looked at him with genuine pity. He still didn't get it. He still thought the world revolved around his ego. "No, Silas," I said softly. "I plan to have a baby. I plan to do my job and go on maternity leave. You fired me. You cut corners. You tweeted. You ignored the safety data. I didn't destroy you. You did this to yourself. I turned my back on him. Security is waiting to escort you out. Leave your badge at the desk. I stood in Silas's old office, now my office. The branding on the wall was already being changed to the Nexus logo. I sat in the leather chair he had fired me from. It felt different now. It didn't feel like a throne, it felt like a responsibility. I picked up the phone and dialed the head of HR, my old assistant, Sarah, who I had rehired 5 minutes ago. Sarah, I said. Draft a memo. We are updating the company policy effective immediately. Maternity and paternity leave is now 6 months, fully paid. For everyone. And reinstate the health insurance for every employee Silas cut. We're fixing this. I hung up and looked out the window at the city skyline. I had one, but not just for me. I had secured a future for my child. My team, and the company. Justice wasn't just about watching the bad guy lose, it was about fixing what he broke. And as I felt the baby kick, I knew we were going to be just fine.